I'm Sammael, and this is 50-50, where Sjmpson and I argue over all things Rocket League. But I'm usually right.
I'm Sjmpson, here to tell you that you're already 0 for 1.
It's 50-50, and this week in Rocket League, a new mechanic creates a shockwave throughout the scene. Support for the RLCS bubble teams is questioned, and we apply hindsight to one of the most iconic moments in RLCS history. But first, we open with the RLCS Winter Split and compare two of the most talked about names of the RLCS transfer window. The new look North America was on full display during the first Winter Split regional, with 9 of the 16 teams in the main event having made a roster move since we last saw them in the fall. As teams dropped out of the playoffs, it was the two biggest names from the transfer window, Daniel and Sypical, making the biggest splash. Almost an inevitability, these two storylines collided in the losers final, with Daniel's SSG besting Sypical's FaZe 4-2 to meet NRG in the finals. Despite neither team taking the overall win in the regional, both players stepped in to make an immediate difference. But who was more influential in their debut with their new team? Sypical or Daniel?
Daniel. I gotta say Daniel. Space Station looked like the stronger team, even with just a quick glance at their second place finish. FaZe struggled a bit to welcome Sypical onto their roster, with both First Killer and AJ double committing alongside him on multiple occasions. And Daniel's confidence in his debut allowed him to maximize the success of the roster. And while we will inevitably see FaZe fix their early mistakes, Daniel's lack of expectations for a particular role on the team allowed him to play his game, and for Arsenal and Reddles to ensure that he was comfortable entering the big stage. Daniel has yet to experience a long-standing 3v3 team environment. So not only was he not typecast into a particular player's position, but his time in tournaments as a younger pickup player meant that he's faced a multitude of different opponents with teammates who have all played differently. The kid's versatile, and he was given free rein to show it. I was also very impressed with Space Station's comm videos and at his poise when it was needed and ability to quickly relay the best play.
All right, well, I'm not surprised you were impressed. All of Twitter was. Literally, it's the only thing I heard about, I think, after that match is how amazing Daniel was, and I get it. He played phenomenally. Both, I think, are perfect for their rosters. I think the pickups and the changes that were made are really fabulous. They both slot in well. But for me, Sypical's performance was kind of overlooked by how much people were just freaking out over Daniel. As I kind of looked into it further, this was really highlighted by the stats. Sypical had a higher goal participation than Daniel, highlighted by more assists as well. So he was involved in more plays that led to goals for FaZe and was really that playmaker on a team that's got First Killer. So that's really saying something if you can stand out on a roster that has First Killer. We know what he can do. So the other thing I look at is in that series against SSG, Sypical is not the reason that they lost. If anything, he's the reason it was so close. He was back on the goal line making stop after stop after stop, keeping FaZe in those games, so he certainly can't be faulted. It was shutdown defense. So for me, being able to play on both sides of the ball and showing that in the regional, I got to give it to Sypical.
The fall major champions failed to replicate their success from the major, winning only one series in the playoffs of the first winter regional before dropping their final two matches against Dignitas and the eventual winners, Team Queso. Despite the recent victory at LAN and dominance over the region in RLCS X, 3 months have now passed since Team BDS have made it to the finals of regional, and they haven't won a regional since beating Vitality last spring, and have yet to secure a regional victory this RLCS season. This is unfamiliar territory for a team that was the best in EU for 5 of the 9 regionals in RLCS X. Should Team BDS be concerned with the results of Winter Regional 1?
Yeah, they definitely should be concerned, because the results, not just the results, but the way that they got to those results were abysmal. So I know the intro of the question kind of talked about the lack of consistency across regionals, so I won't necessarily hit on that too hard, but I certainly think it is a point to be made that we haven't seen BDS win a regional for almost a year now. But we look and we see at how they lost in the regional, and it sets red flags for me. When we look at those 2 losses that knocked them out of the playoffs, they got swept in both of those losses, so that's eight straight losses to exit. And then on top of that, they were not scoring at all. One of the most abysmal 2 series that I have ever seen from a top team when it comes to scoring and the offensive side of the ball. They had 2 goals in 8 games, and in their final 6 games, they didn't score a goal. That means they got perfect swept against Dignitas, and in those 2 series, they had 0.25 goals per game. That is like so bad, I can't even overstate how bad that is, because it's just not good at all. So if they're not scoring, they're not going to win anything. I don't care how many regionals they've won. They're going to have to correct this and do it quick.
A perfect sweep. It's a good point. Little concern there for sure, but frankly, I think it's silly to worry about them long term. Third place finish in a region where the victors came from the open qualifiers. There are so many capable teams in this region, and though BDS did have that dynasty level experience in RLCS X, I think dropping a regional to 2 capable teams is not something they nor the viewers should garner any concern over. It's important to note also that Monkey Moon tested positive for COVID heading into this regional, and while there were no indications that he was sick on the day, he did have to miss his team's boot camp. If Endpoint's success from boot camping and this third place result, despite Monkey Moon's lack of attendance, are anything to show, I think a physical environment can give your team a serious leg up, and there are some powerhouse of teams that still can't even afford that luxury yet. So you better watch out when BDS back on land, back in person for a team, because they're going to keep bringing it.
We stick with EU and move over to Team Queso, who was perfect in the playoffs of the first regional, winning all 3 series played in the upper bracket, while dropping only 1 game in their final 2 matches against BDS and Dignitas, en route to the org's first RLCS regional win since acquiring a new roster. This new roster formed July of last year, and the combo of Joyo, Vatira, and Rise have found success in a short period of time, transforming from a team that failed to break into the top 8 in the first 2 regionals into a consistent threat that has made playoffs in each of the last 2. The win to start off the winter split nets Team Queso a much-needed 350 points towards eligibility for the RLCS World Championship, vaulting them to 6th in the standings overall in Europe, and, if the seeding as of today was used, firmly places them as a wild card team for Worlds. Simpson, what was the single most impressive thing about Team Queso's victory?
This might sound a little bit silly given their record, but the fact that they all called it going in was what impressed me the most. Vatira knew that this team was going to bring home a regional this season. They got it right out the gates. And Rise went into the weekend with screenshots showing he had a premonition their team was clicking at a good enough level to take down the rest of the competition. Not only that, but there were 3 regions of support behind the team's coach, Nick on RL. The amount of players, coaches, as well as just individuals around the scene who had with confidence said that Nick on RL was a regional caliber coach who could tap into the full potential of these young players is nothing to scoff at. The early comparisons drawn to Joyo and Jorias were playful and fun at the time. This is just a little simple jab at the name, but when it came down to it, the buzz coming into this regional surrounding the team entirely, and the confidence in their ability to win from both inside the org of Team Queso and surrounding was incredibly impressive to witness unfold in real time.
Well, I got to look at what they did on the field. I got to look at the dominance that they had on the defensive side of the ball, especially in the playoffs. They did things in the playoffs that teams dream of as far as defense, because it was just ridiculous. 1.06 goals against per game across the playoffs. That's like unheard of. You give up a goal a game, you're going to win almost every single time. They did that across the entirety of the playoff bracket. Just absurd. So for me, looking at that defensive effort, combined with some of the premonition that you talk about, I mean, this team is clearly trending upward. They kept BDS to 2 goals in 4 games. And then the other thing that really got me is that this team is a team that can play in a tight contest, a 1-goal game, and they are not phased whatsoever. 11 of the 16 games in the playoffs were 1-goal games, and they came out on the right side of those more often than not. This team has ice in their veins.
The beginning of a new RLCS season introduced a unique format for each of the 3 splits. The conclusion of the fall split, which featured a Swiss stage leading into a single elimination playoffs, signals the start of a next format in the series. The main event of Winter Split divides 16 teams into 4 groups, which feed into a double elimination playoff bracket. Concern over the format was expressed loudly across pros and fans within the community alike, with a broad range of criticism, including concerns with how groups were seeded, tiebreaker rules, and the structure of the playoff bracket. Additionally, the decision to use 3 separate formats for each of the splits has also drawn some criticism of its own. Is the Winter Split group stage less compelling than the Fall Split Swiss stage?
Yeah, it really is, and for me there was something that really jumped out in this format. But overall, as I heard, even prior to knowing about the individual formats, the differences between the 3 splits felt a little bit weird to me. It almost feels like Psyonix just sort of throwing things at the wall, formats at the wall, and seeing what sticks, seeing what's popular. But even outside of that, to get into this individual format, the main thing that I struggle with is how many teams make it to the playoffs. So I'm not even going to address some of those other concerns. I think a lot of good concerns coming from the community. But for me, something I didn't see a ton about was the fact that 12 of the 16 teams make it down into the playoff bracket. So when you've got 16 teams in the group stage, only 4 are getting knocked out, 1 from each group. And for me, that's just not enough. I mean, you don't see this really anywhere. You look at pro sports, they don't do that. Nobody does that. It's at least, or at most, half of the teams make it. And then a lot of times it's less than that. So to see 75% of the teams make it into the playoffs, I think that's really the start of this format going wrong. And then when you say the playoffs are double elim, but 8 of the teams really are out after that single elim, it feels a little bit disingenuous there. I really just think we should just go with a Swiss stage, similar to what we saw in the fall regional, but then do a double elim in the playoffs. For me, that's the best of both worlds, and I'd really like to see them go that route.
I gotta say, I do appreciate Psyonix putting on events that try unique formats firsthand so they can gather some constructive criticism from the players and from the audience even, but that's not what RLCS is for. Hopefully this will lead to there being a format where it feels like they're confident in a structure that is recurring and expected for the players signing up and the veterans alike. I just wish we didn't need to sacrifice splits in order for this to come together, when I think that this winter split is less compelling, like you were asking. I think Swiss stages are more reliable long-term at ensuring the most capable teams get a spot in the playoffs towards contention at the largest pot of points, and that's what it's all about. So I anticipate that the players will continue to voice frustrations throughout the split, the lack of taking into consideration the head-to-head or the game differential, and we'll have to see if this all comes to a result that's better for the players in the end.
In the summer of 2021, South American team Complexity made Rocket League history as the first roster to move its entire team to another region. Since then, they have made it to the playoffs of every RLCS regional they've played. That's 4 straight tournaments dating back to the start of the fall split. The only other teams to do this are NRG, G2, and Space Station. Amongst a slew of roster changes across the region since their arrival, the team has also stuck together, becoming the current longest standing trio in NA, with Shad, RaiseBull, and AJG having played together since April of 2020. Simpson, considering all of this, is Complexity being overlooked as the most underrated team in North America?
No, Sam, I don't think they are. Complexity are a powerhouse, and I absolutely love the success that they're finding in this region, but I can't call them underrated after a top 8 finish at the major, because at this point, if you're sleeping on them, you're just behind. They have multiple regions of experience under their belt, and though Complexity were a little quiet this past regional, they got swept away during a lower bracket run, which the Gauntlet, quite frankly, ate a lot of NA and EU's best teams alive this split, so can't fault them too much there. Might seem like a little bit of an underdog, but when you look at it, face value, no, they're not underrated. They're an excellent caliber team in the region and formerly of South America's region.
Yeah, but nobody's talking about him. Who's talking about him? I'm watching. It seems like nobody's ever bringing this team up. So for me, I got to say, yeah, they are the most underrated roster. Even me, when I'm looking some of this stuff up, I'm realizing, wait, they're the longest standing roster in NA? Even I didn't know that. So, I mean, where is the press for these guys, and where's the just in general? I swear I don't see anything about them. So I think for that reason alone, I got to say, yeah, they're the most underrated. They're just so deceptively good. And when I look at some of the teams that they've already taken out, I think you're in agreement. They've arrived, because you've got wins over G2, FaZe, they've beat SSG twice, including that tiebreaker to get into the major. So that was just huge, keeping SSG out. And then also they took out Team Envy in the major as well. So the wins are there. This is a team that's for real. And honestly, in that major, they were only knocked out by Team BDS. So who knows how far they could have gotten if not getting taken out by the eventual winners. So for me, yeah, I think they are underrated. Nobody's talking about this team. They really need to start talking about them because this is a team that's sticking together. I don't see them going anywhere.
And now we move from the impact a team can make in a region to the impact a new mechanic can have in competitive play. It's been over 6 years since Rocket League's initial release in 2015, but that hasn't stopped new mechanics from being developed. Recently, the competitive community was again in awe when a previously unknown technique was discovered. Now named the Feetlix Jump, after the creator with the same name, this mechanic allows a player to get a flip reset off the wall, providing unlimited time to perform a dodge at any point during their aerial. Essentially, a successful Feetlix Jump can harness the power of a flip reset with everything that's great about your typical wall shot. The possibilities generated from the Feetlix Jump has created a buzz across the scene, with even the best players in the world taking note. But how important is the Feetlix Jump, and is it viable in competitive play right now as it stands today?
Well, initially I thought that it would have a minor impact, and it would be something that maybe would take some time to become a viable option, because the biggest concern is the setup. Certainly takes some time on the wall to get that setup, but it doesn't take as long as I thought. As I was looking into this more and more and seeing players already practice this, I'm beginning to turn a little bit. I think this is actually a viable move. I mean, clearly it's a game changer if you can pull it off. If you can get off the wall and get that reset, you're in the air with your aerial. Now you've got a ton of options. So once you're there, it's a game changer. So for me, our player is going to be able to get that off in the speed of competitive play. I don't think we're going to see it a ton. I'm not necessarily saying it's going to be something that you're seeing every single game or even every match, but I think somebody's going to pull it off. And when they do, it's going to be notable. It's going to be ridiculous. And we're all just going to realize that you better watch out because the Feetlix isn't going anywhere. This is something that players are going to have to defend from here on out. It's just another tool in the arsenal for these guys. It's just ridiculous.
Dial it back a little bit, Sam. Go with your gut, because it isn't yet. Unfortunately, it's still a bit too slow at the moment to be viable in the pace that RLCS is consistently presenting. While a few clips are showing it executed nearly invisibly, many takeoffs are still being projected to the opponent, just enough for them to know that they're going to have to send their second man at it to challenge early and force a play with the flip. I believe this mechanic will evolve past the state that it's in right now, and it's great that we have a way to consistently execute it with this technique of front flipping and using the side flip to hit it consistently off the side wall. But I believe that this could be optimized by purposefully tilting your front wheels in and holding the stick forward and using your directional air roll to flip away from the wall that you're on to get more of a tornado spin motion to it. And I think if we do find a way to utilize the suction that the lip of the wall presents and have it be faster, more quickly executed, I think it will ultimately become viable in niche situations for the most mechanical of players. But unfortunately, right now, still a bit of development to do for that play.
The continued focus for Psyonix towards improving RLCS across NA and EU has enabled the players and teams at the top of Rocket League esports to flourish. This focus has provided an atmosphere for the already best rosters to improve, bringing with it the most stability within RLCS to date. However, improvement for most teams has come through acquisition of known talent from teams which have already made RLCS, with a limited influx of players coming directly from the bubble scene. This has only further widened the gap between the best teams and the players who are looking to break through, bringing concern among some members of the community regarding a need for opportunity for growth below the RLCS level. The conversation has focused strongly on the infrequency and inconsistency of community tournaments, with much blame being placed directly on lack of sponsorship from Psyonix on this tier of competition. But is more needed from Psyonix to support these teams? And should Psyonix be the primary supporter for growth and stability in the bubble scene?
Should Psyonix be the primary supporter? No. It's important for Psyonix to support the bubble scene and keep the game growing and competitive, but their main focus should always be on expanding the upper echelon of play and its outreach. Having one or two outlets monitored by Psyonix will help keep teams from disbanding, and Psyonix providing those outlets with additional financial motivations, I think is crucial. We do need that support from Psyonix, but seeing community-driven tournaments is not only good for the players, but it helps identify the talents like Lukish and Dazarin, who have repeatedly shown they're committed to the game, they're passionate, and are building incredible tournaments that would never have seen the light of day under the restrictions of a AAA company like Psyonix. And so we still need the grassroots origin of the game to support it, and we do need Psyonix supporting that, but should it be their primary support? Should it be the primary outlet for the bubble teams? I'm going to say no.
Well, I would just ask, if not Psyonix, then who? You mentioned community, and I just don't see the kind of dollars being behind these community outlets that's required to get the players to show up. Even if it's community front-facing, we need to have Psyonix behind the scenes to bolster these tournaments. That's what happened back in the day. That's what happened with PRL, Rival. You know it as much as I do. Psyonix was right there, helping to boost us on the community side. And honestly, at this point, since they have raised the ceiling as much as they have, the prize ceiling has gotten so ridiculous in RLCS, and that's a good thing, don't get me wrong. But because of that, I think players are expecting the prize floor to raise as well. Gone are the days of $300 tournaments where you're going to get some of the best names showing up. That's just not going to happen. We're not even seeing players necessarily show up for prize pools that are over $1,000. And so with that in mind, I just wonder how are community tournaments going to foot the bill for some of these endeavors if they don't have Psyonix backing them. And then looking at where we came from to where we are now, we had Rival Series, we had Renegade Cup. As a commentator, those were amazing. Those were outlets even for the bubble casters to get opportunities just like the players. And if you don't have a scene where you can face or talk about the best people, how are you going to continue to hone your craft? And I think right now Psyonix is really lacking in that support. They set the stage by supporting it early, and they've got to keep it going. It's the only way we're going to see this tier of the esport continue to flourish and continue to improve. This is Quick Chat, where we take your tweets and respond to them in the only way a Rocket League player knows how, with a passive-aggressive Quick Chat. And we kick it off with Johnny Boy, who says it's amazing how similar RL Sideswipe is to RL. They've even managed to set it up so that the average IQ of every Dominus main I've seen is exactly as low as you'd expect. Little details like that really add to the immersion and nostalgia.
Need boost. These guys just want to showcase some mechanics. Doesn't mean they're low IQ, but I appreciate the banter, Johnny. Now we're jumping on over to the analyst desk with Gibbs saying non-standard maps allowed Rocket League mechanics to take off. Without Neo Tokyo, would the reset mechanic exist? 7 years later, new mechanics are still being found thanks to that Neo Tokyo update. Hashtag praise non-standard maps.
Defending, because I am defensive over this. Neo Tokyo not in competitive, it's a tragedy. And we move over to Octane GG, who say, today, K-Dopt played his 1,000th RL Esports RLCS game, becoming the second player to do so after Garrett G. Legend.
One more game. K-Dopt refuses to quit. That's all I got to say. Going behind the scenes of some of Leftmir's YouTube videos, taking a talk with his editor, Danny Lotus, saying Rocket League needs to stop trying so hard to be cool. We get it. It's hard. It takes a ton of time to get good. It's an exciting esport, but where's the fun shit for people that don't want to do that?
What a game! What do you need? You got Drop Shot, Hoops, Snow Day, Rumble, Heat Seeker, Spike Rush. What more do you filthy casuals need from this game? This one coming from Flitz in the top 100. Been 6 years since Rocket League came out, and still no top 100 rank or top 100 season reward.
Rematch. You're playing the same pool of players up there, so unless you're consistently top 10 in farming pros, you'll have better luck teaming with your rank B brethren over in six-mans. Coming at you from the other side of the solar system, we got a planet whose status may have been revoked solely for this take alone. I break rule ones immediately every single time.
And as always, to end the show, we take a look back and change the outcomes of some of the biggest moments in Rocket League history. Because here, hindsight's actually 50-50. Prior to Season 5, the NRG roster of Garrett G, Jacob, and Fireburner had taken the team about as far as they could go. An early exit at the Season 4 finals in DC would mark the first time that NRG would not win a single series at Worlds in their 3 seasons of attendance. The offseason addition of Justin would reinvigorate the team, boosting NRG to the first undefeated regular season in the history of RLCS. The new trio proved even more deadly upon arrival in London, where they dominated the upper bracket, securing a spot in the grand finals versus Dignitas with ease. A lower bracket run meant Dig would need to win 2 series to complete the bracket reset. Dig did their part in the first, winning 4 games to 1, and with the second series tied 3-3, Dignitas took a late lead in Game 7, and what followed goes down as one of the most iconic moments in RL Esports history. A ridiculous 0-second rally by NRG, capped off by a goal by Justin to send the game to OT. But for NRG, that's it. That's the end of the story. Dignitas would win in OT, slam the door, and they're the champions. But what if instead, NRG actually scores in OT, they complete the comeback, and they are RLCS Season 5 champs?
Well, Sam, the possibilities here are endless. Picking apart the most iconic moment in the history of the esport is no small task. So let's rewind back a little bit to that moment, envision how it went down, and I gotta say, first things first, seeing Fireburner lift that trophy with the classic NRG roster feels too right to me. So natural. And I think that ultimately Fireburner does still retire a few seasons later, a bit more on his terms, and moves into the coaching role for NRG. And in this case, it means we might miss out on some amazing moments, like him subbing in and getting an MVP for Cloud9 and moving into that coach role for them in version 1 later. But ultimately, I don't think NRG is where we need to shift our focus here. Instead, a defeated Dignitas, who isn't the type of roster that likes to settle for second, might start to snowball some changes for the European region. I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt and say that they stick together for one more season here, following it up. But after a beating from Cloud9 in Season 6, I do believe that we see KDOP still leave to form that super team with KDOP over on Vitality, leaving Violent Panda and Turbo Pulsar together on Dignitas, where they fail to qualify for Worlds with Yukio. And now here's where things really start to snowball. No longer does NRG have a if you can't beat them, join them type scenario where they're obligated to bring Turbo overseas as a Dignitas roster falls apart. Instead, Dignitas, who is an excellent org that takes care of their players, is trying to foster a good environment for Violent Panda and Turbo to come back into the limelight, to get that redemption arc. But Violent Panda, ultimately the captain of this roster, the leader and the talent scout that he is on this organization, when given the chance to pick up Astral down the line, he does so, and he does it with Yukio, leaving Turbo left in the wind a bit and ultimately becoming one of those players of the likes of a Ronicky or a Tadpole, where an excellent striking and capability on a roster once upon a time, but maybe struggling to find a team that really meshes like they used to in that environment. And KDOP now getting the recognition he deserves with a more recent World Championship record on that Vitality roster, perhaps becomes the face of the old Dignitas dynasty as well, as opposed to that Turbo Pulsar, who no longer exists as a 3-time or 4-time World Championship in this timeline. So ultimately, this one moment, it changed the landscape of Rocket League esports forever.
Well, I like that. I like where your focus is at, because we don't need to look at NRG too much. I think they kept Fireburner around even with the loss, so of course they're going to keep Fireburner even longer, probably there. Or like you said, he's able to leave and feel pretty good about that on his own terms. So let's look at Dig, yeah. And I'm not going to give Dig the benefit of the doubt like you did. I don't think that they're going to keep that same team after they lose. So they lose in iconic fashion at that point, and they are looking to rebound immediately. They especially are looking to do this because they have got a free agent that's available right then and there. That is one of the biggest free agents to that point and really in the history of the sport. That's Scrubkilla. Scrubkilla is eligible, and that means they pull the trigger right then and there. I do think it's Turbo on the way out. They drop him. They pull Scrubkilla in. I think you're right about some of that for Turbo's side of things. Probably never goes over to NA because of that early move there. And over on the Dig side, they shape what begins to be a real dynasty on EU potentially the strongest dynasty we've ever seen, or strongest team we've really ever seen in EU. Because I have them winning in Season 6. So I think Dig bounces back. They have Scrubkilla on that roster. They take down Cloud9 in Season 6. That strips Cloud9 of the championship. I don't think they get one at all at that point. They probably leave Rocket League even sooner or replace Torment. A lot of implications there. But focus on Dig. I think looking into Season 7, this team wants to get even better. They see that Panda was a little bit lacking in the performance despite the win. And they also know that K-Dop wants to play with Fairy Peak. So why not establish the roster that got together in Season 7 anyway? Fairy Peak comes in, replaces Panda, and now we have a Dig roster that looks exactly like the Vitality roster that won in Season 7, but they're going to do it under the Dig name. That creates the start of that dynasty. It's back-to-back championships now for them. K-Dop has made it to 4 World Championship finals in a row and won 3 of them. And so what does this do? This cements K-Dop as the greatest player in Rocket League history to that point, and maybe to this day, making him the only player to get 3. And really, the sky is only up there for Dig as they probably continue to make adjustments and improvements and may just get a few more as well as they go on. So I think K-Dop is the definite one right here who wins in this scenario, as he is atop the Rocket League world. The show may be over, but hopefully we didn't let the ball drop. Until next time, this has been 50-50.